I'm Ethel, 68 years old, and until recently, I was living in the family mansion with my daughter Amanda's family. After 40 years of teaching elementary school and a wonderful marriage to my late husband Jackson, I never expected to be treated like a burden. But when my 17-year-old granddaughter said my room stinks right in front of everyone, something inside me snapped. Before I tell you how I went from a belittled mother to living my best life, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself. Jackson and I built our dream home together over 40 years ago. It was a beautiful 6-bedroom mansion with a swimming pool and gardens that Jackson designed himself. We raised our only daughter Amanda there, filling every corner with love and memories. Jackson was the owner of a successful construction company, and we lived comfortably, never wanting for anything material. We always planned to pass everything down to Amanda and eventually our grandchildren. 3 years ago, Jackson died unexpectedly from a heart attack. At 65, I found myself alone in our big house, overwhelmed with grief and loneliness. The silence was deafening after decades of marriage. Every room held memories that both comforted and haunted me. About 6 months after Jackson's passing, Amanda approached me with what seemed like a thoughtful suggestion. She was 42 at the time, married to Brian, 45, with two teenagers, Sophia and Tyler, who were 17 and 15. "Mom, why don't we all move in together?" Amanda proposed. "You can have the entire East Wing to yourself. That way you won't be alone and we can help take care of you." It seemed perfect. I would have my independence while still seeing my family every day. I wouldn't have to sell the home Jackson and I built together. And most importantly, I wouldn't be alone anymore. The arrangement worked beautifully at first. I would have breakfast with the family most mornings. I helped Tyler with his math homework and discussed books with Sophia. I taught Amanda some of her father's favorite recipes. Brian even consulted me about some home improvement projects. Financially, nothing changed. Jackson had left everything to me, including the house and his business. I was generous with Amanda and her family, paying for family vacations and helping with the grandchildren's private school tuition. I never questioned these expenses because family was everything to me. Looking back, I can see the signs that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Decisions about the house, like repainting the living room or redesigning the kitchen, were made without my input. When I mentioned this to Amanda, she said, "Oh, Mom, we didn't want to bother you with small details. You deserve to rest after working so hard all your life." It sounded considerate, but something felt off. Still, I dismissed my concerns. I was probably just being too sensitive after losing Jackson. I needed to be grateful for my loving family. Our family dinners, which used to be nightly events, gradually became less frequent. "We're just so busy, Mom," Amanda would explain. "Brian has late meetings, the kids have activities, you know how it is." I tried to stay relevant by cooking special Sunday dinners and offering to drive the grandchildren to their activities, but increasingly found myself alone in my wing of the house, looking at old photographs and wondering if Jackson would recognize our family dynamics now. 6 months into our new living arrangement, I started noticing more significant changes. My opinion seemed to matter less and less in household decisions. When I suggested we plant Jackson's favorite roses in the garden that spring, Amanda smiled politely and said, "We were thinking of going with something more modern, Mom. Those old-fashioned flowers require too much maintenance." The "we" she referred to was always Amanda and Brian, never including me. The house that Jackson and I had built together was slowly becoming theirs, and I was just a guest. Amanda began subtly restricting my access to certain parts of the house. "Mom, we're having Brian's colleagues over tonight. Would you mind staying in your wing? We need to use the main dining room." These requests became more frequent until I rarely ventured beyond my designated area. As teenagers, Sophia and Tyler naturally became more distant, absorbed in their own lives. I understood this was normal, but it hurt when I wasn't invited to Sophia's 17th birthday dinner at her favorite restaurant. When I asked Amanda about it later, she said, "We thought you'd be too tired, Mom. It was a late dinner, and you know how you usually go to bed early." I nodded and smiled, swallowing my hurt. I had been a teacher for 40 years, often staying up late grading papers. The assumption that I couldn't handle a late dinner stung, but I kept telling myself that Amanda was just trying to be considerate. Brian became increasingly cold toward me. He would barely acknowledge my presence when he came home from work, heading straight to his study or their bedroom without even a hello. One evening, I overheard him talking to Amanda in the kitchen. "How much longer do we have to keep up this arrangement?" he asked, his voice low but clear enough for me to hear from the hallway. Amanda's response was too quiet to make out, but the implication was clear. I was a burden they were tolerating, not a beloved family member they wanted around. My living space gradually shrank from the entire East Wing to just my bedroom and adjoining sitting room. The other rooms in my wing mysteriously became storage areas or were repurposed for Amanda's home business. Maintenance issues in my space went unaddressed despite my repeated requests. The bathroom faucet developed a leak that went unfixed for weeks. The windows in my sitting room became drafty and no one seemed concerned about fixing them. "We'll get to it, Mom," Amanda would say whenever I brought these issues up. "We've just been so busy lately." My loneliness grew deeper by the day. I found myself watching the clock, waiting for moments when I might casually run into my grandchildren or have a brief conversation with Amanda. I became acutely aware of being a burden in what was legally my own home. During these difficult months, I often remembered something Jackson said to me on our 40th anniversary. "Always remember your worth, Ethel. You've built a life of kindness and strength that no one can take away unless you let them." At the time, it seemed like a sweet sentiment. Now his words felt prophetic. As the months passed, Amanda's behavior regarding finances became increasingly controlling. She began making suggestions about how I should handle my money, which was actually the family wealth that Jackson had built and left entirely to me. "Mom, don't you think you should add me to your accounts?" she asked one morning over coffee. "Just for convenience, in case anything happens to you, I could help manage things." I hesitated. Jackson had always been clear that I should maintain control of our assets. "I'll think about it," I replied, not wanting to create conflict but feeling uneasy. Amanda's social life expanded and her friends regularly visited our home. When they came over, I was treated almost like hired help rather than the owner of the home. They would ask me to bring them drinks or snacks, barely acknowledging me otherwise. The worst was when Amanda asked me to stay in my room during a dinner party she was hosting for her book club. "It's just that we'll be discussing adult topics, Mom," she explained as if I were a child instead of a woman in her 60s. "And we need all the seating in the dining room." I quietly complied, eating a sandwich in my room while laughter and conversation echoed through the house. The humiliation burned, but I told myself this was what mothers did. We sacrifice for our children's happiness. Around this time, I began experiencing some health concerns. Nothing serious, just joint pain and occasional dizzy spells, but I kept these to myself. I didn't want to give Amanda and Brian more reason to treat me like an invalid. My former teaching colleague, Margaret, noticed the change in me during one of our rare lunch outings. We had been friends for over 30 years, and she could read me like a book. "Are you really happy living like this, Ethel?" she asked directly after I had finished telling her about my new cozy arrangement with Amanda's family. "Of course I am," I replied defensively. "I get to see my grandchildren every day." "Do you actually see them, though?" Margaret pressed. "Or do they just pass by your room on their way to their own lives?" Her question lingered with me long after our lunch. I began to notice how rarely I actually interacted meaningfully with my grandchildren despite living in the same house. Tyler would occasionally stop by to ask for help with homework or to tell me about a school project, showing brief moments of genuine connection. Sophia, however, barely acknowledged me beyond obligatory hellos. Amanda's criticisms of me became more frequent and less subtle. She commented on my cooking. "Mom, nobody uses that much butter anymore," my appearance. "That hairstyle really ages you," and my opinions. "Those ideas are so outdated, Mom." Sitting alone in my room one evening, looking at the photograph of Jackson and me on our last anniversary, I realized a painful truth. The home we had built together no longer felt like mine at all. I had become a guest, and not even a welcome one. The incident that changed everything happened during one of Amanda's book club gatherings. She had been planning it for weeks, determined to impress her social circle with our home and her hosting abilities. I spent days helping prepare the house, polishing silver that had been in Jackson's family for generations, preparing elaborate desserts that Amanda claimed as her own creations. My efforts received barely a nod of acknowledgement. On the day of the event, elegant women from Amanda's social circle arrived in expensive cars carrying designer handbags and bottles of wine. They filled our living room with perfumed air and sophisticated conversation. I tried to participate in their discussion about the latest bestseller, which I had actually read and enjoyed. I thought the author's perspective on family dynamics was quite insightful. I offered during a brief lull in conversation. The women glanced at me with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes before Amanda smoothly redirected the conversation. "Speaking of family dynamics, did anyone see that new exhibit at the art museum Brian and I took the kids last weekend?" As the afternoon wore on, I felt increasingly invisible. I retreated to the kitchen to bring out more refreshments, telling myself I was being helpful rather than hiding. The situation took an unexpected turn when Sophia arrived home with 3 friends from school. They were laughing loudly, disrupting the refined atmosphere Amanda had worked so hard to create. "Mom, can we hang out in Grandma's wing?" Sophia asked Amanda. "We need space for a TikTok video and it's quieter over there." Before Amanda could answer, the teenagers had already headed toward my private space. Alarmed at the thought of my personal belongings being disturbed, I excused myself and followed them. I found the girls in my bedroom rummaging through my jewelry box and trying on the few nice pieces Jackson had given me over the years. "What are you girls looking for?" I asked gently, trying not to sound accusatory. Sophia rolled her eyes. "Just looking for something vintage for our video, Grandma. No big deal." I was about to suggest they ask before going through my personal things when Sophia wrinkled her nose and turned to her friends. "Let's go somewhere else," she said loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. "My grandma's room stinks like old people." Her friends giggled, and I felt my face flush with humiliation. But what happened next hurt even more. Amanda had followed us down the hallway and overheard her daughter's comment. Instead of correcting Sophia's rudeness, she laughed along with the teenagers. "Mom, maybe you should use more air freshener," Amanda said, her voice carrying back to where her book club friends were gathering in the hallway, curious about the commotion. The East Wing does have a certain smell. The women from the book club exchanged glances, some looking uncomfortable, others barely concealing their amusement. I stood there frozen in my own bedroom, suddenly an outsider in the home I had created with the man I loved. Without a word, I turned and walked back to my sitting room, closing the door quietly behind me. I could hear Amanda smoothly guiding her guests back to the living room, making some joke about teenage drama to dispel any awkwardness. That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, I sat alone looking at old photographs of Jackson and me in happier times. Tears slid down my face as I traced his smile with my fingertip. "What would you do, Jackson?" I whispered to his image. Something in me broke that day, but something else was born. A resolve I hadn't felt in years began to form. I was 68 years old, but suddenly I realized that didn't mean my life was over. It meant I had the wisdom of experience to guide my next steps. The morning after the book club incident, I called Richard Wilson, our family lawyer who had been handling our affairs for over 30 years. He agreed to meet me for lunch at a small cafe far from our neighborhood where I wouldn't run into any of Amanda's friends. "I need to understand exactly what my financial and legal position is," I told him after we'd ordered, specifically regarding the house and Jackson's business. Richard's expression was concerned but professional. Ethel Jackson was very clear in his will. "Everything was left solely to you, the house, the business, all investments and accounts. Amanda's inheritance is entirely at your discretion." This revelation stunned me. I had always assumed some legal arrangement had already been made for Amanda to inherit everything. Finding out that I had complete control was both empowering and terrifying. "What are you considering, Ethel?" Richard asked gently. I took a deep breath. "I need to make a change. I can't continue living as I am." Over the next 2 weeks, I conducted extensive research. I looked into luxury senior communities, beachfront condos, and small houses in charming towns. I spent hours online when the house was empty, exploring options that had never occurred to me before. A beautiful cottage in a coastal community about 2 hours away caught my eye. It had 2 bedrooms, a garden, perfect for growing roses, and was walking distance to the beach. The pictures showed sunlight streaming through large windows and a kitchen with modern appliances, but a cozy, homey feel. I could immediately envision myself there, peaceful and independent. I researched the real estate market in our area and discovered that our mansion, in its prestigious neighborhood, had significantly appreciated in value since Jackson and I purchased the land and built on it decades ago. The potential sale would more than fund my new life with plenty left over. At night, when everyone was asleep, I began secretly packing treasured photographs and small mementos that held special meaning. I carefully selected items of Jackson's that I couldn't bear to part with his favorite watch, the love letters he wrote me when we were dating, the collection of seashells from our honeymoon. I made appointments with financial advisors, ensuring they understood the need for discretion. I set up new bank accounts at a different institution from the one Amanda and I had always used. I arranged for Jackson's business profits to be directed to these new accounts going forward, with a portion set aside for charity in his name. I reconnected with old friends and former colleagues who had retired to different parts of the country. The conversations were refreshing and affirming. They remembered me as Ethel, the dedicated teacher, the loving wife, the independent woman with opinions and dreams, not just as Amanda's mother or Sophia and Tyler's grandmother. Margaret was particularly supportive when I confided my plans to her over coffee at her house, away from any prying eyes. "It's time you lived for yourself, Ethel," she said firmly. "Jackson would want that for you." Despite my growing determination, I experienced moments of doubt and guilt. Was I being selfish? Would this decision permanently damage my relationship with my daughter and grandchildren? But then I would remember Sophia's casual cruelty and Amanda's betrayal, laughing at her mother's humiliation instead of defending her. The final piece of my plan fell into place when Amanda mentioned their annual 2-week summer vacation to Hawaii. "We've booked the usual villa," she told me. "You'll be comfortable here by yourself, right, Mom?" Or we could look into a temporary caregiver if you're worried about being alone. The assumption that at 68 I would need a caregiver for 2 weeks of independence was the final confirmation I needed. I'll be fine, I assured her. Actually, I've been feeling a bit under the weather lately. It's probably better if I don't travel. Amanda's relief was palpable and painful to witness. That's probably for the best. The flight is so long and you know how you get tired easily these days. The day they left, I hugged my grandchildren and told them I loved them. When I embraced Amanda, I held on a moment longer than usual, knowing everything would be different when they returned. As their airport taxi pulled away, I stood in the doorway of the mansion Jackson and I had built with so much hope and love. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like Jackson was smiling down on me, approving of what I was about to do. The moment the taxi disappeared from view, I sprang into action. I called the real estate agent I'd been secretly consulting and confirmed that we should list the mansion immediately. Within hours, a professional photographer was capturing images of every immaculate room. This property will move fast, the agent assured me. The location alone would sell it, but the house itself is spectacular. She was right. Within 3 days, we had multiple offers well above asking price. I accepted a cash offer with a quick closing from a tech executive relocating from California. The paperwork was expedited and the sale was completed just 5 days after Amanda and her family left for Hawaii. Meanwhile, I finalized the purchase of my coastal cottage. The timing worked perfectly as that seller was also looking for a quick close. I arranged for movers to pack only the items I had designated, leaving the rest of the mansion's furnishings as part of the sale. The day I first visited my new home as its owner was emotional. The cottage was even more charming in person, with its white clapboard exterior and blue shutters. Inside, natural light flooded every room. The previous owner had maintained beautiful gardens that reminded me of ones Jackson and I had planned together when we were first married. The master bedroom had a small balcony overlooking the ocean. Standing there, feeling the sea breeze on my face, I experienced a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. "This is for us, Jackson," I whispered to the wind. "A new chapter." I spent the next several days setting up my new space exactly as I wanted it. For the first time since Jackson's death, I made decisions based solely on my own preferences. I hung artwork where I wanted it, arranged furniture to suit my needs, and created a cozy reading nook by the front window. My new neighbors stopped by with welcoming gifts, homemade bread, a potted plant, a bottle of local wine. They were friendly without being intrusive, interested in me as a person, rather than as someone's mother or grandmother. "There's a book club that meets at the library every Thursday," my neighbor Louise mentioned, "and a walking group on Tuesday mornings if you're interested." Within a week, I had joined both groups plus a volunteer program at the local elementary school where I could use my teaching background to help children with reading difficulties. The familiar rhythms of working with young students brought me joy without the complicated emotions attached to my own grandchildren. I treated myself to a new hairstyle at the local salon, something more modern but age-appropriate. I updated my wardrobe with comfortable but stylish clothes that reflected my new coastal lifestyle. With each small change, I felt more like myself, a self I had nearly forgotten existed. The physical transformation extended beyond appearances. Without the constant stress of walking on eggshells in my own home, my health improved. The joint pain I'd been experiencing lessened with daily walks on the beach. I slept better in my new bedroom with the sound of waves as my lullaby. Remembering my grandchildren, I set up the second bedroom with twin beds and a desk, keeping the door open to the possibility of visits someday. Through Richard, I established education trusts for both Sophia and Tyler, accessible when they turned 25 without Amanda's involvement. I also arranged for a portion of the profits from Jackson's construction company to fund a scholarship for students pursuing careers in construction or architecture, honoring his legacy in a way that felt meaningful. After I was fully settled, I invited Margaret and 2 other old friends for a small housewarming gathering. We sat on my new patio overlooking the garden, drinking wine and catching up. Their approval and happiness for me validated my decision. It was during this pleasant evening that my phone rang. The screen showed Amanda's name. My friends fell silent as I answered. "Mom, we've been trying to reach you for days." Amanda's voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. "Where are you?" I'm at my new home," I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. I excused myself from my friends and took the call in my living room. "What do you mean, your new home?" "We came back early because the resort lost power after a storm and there are strangers in our house. They say they bought it." Amanda's voice rose hysterically with each word. "Not our house, Amanda. My house," I corrected her gently. "And yes, I sold it. The new owners are a lovely couple from California." There was a moment of a stunned silence before Amanda exploded. "You what? How could you do this without discussing it with us? Where are we supposed to live? What about our things?" "I left your personal belongings in your rooms. The new owners agreed to let you pack everything this week. As for where you'll live, I imagine you'll find a nice place with a generous down payment I've arranged to be transferred to your account tomorrow." The silence that followed was profound. When Amanda spoke again, her voice trembled with rage. "We're coming to wherever you are right now. Text me the address." I took a deep breath. "No, Amanda, not today. I have guests. We can meet tomorrow at Richard's office to discuss the financial arrangements. 1 o'clock. I ended the call before she could respond and rejoined my friends, apologizing for the interruption. They looked concerned, but I managed a genuine smile. "It was time for some difficult truths," I said. "Now who's ready for dessert?" The next day I arrived at Richard's office 15 minutes early, composed and prepared. Amanda, Brian, and to my surprise, both grandchildren arrived precisely at 1, all looking shell-shocked and angry. Amanda launched into accusations the moment the door closed behind them. "How could you betray your own family like this after all we've done for you?" Richard, professional as always, intervened smoothly. "Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss the situation calmly." Once seated, I looked directly at my daughter. "The house was always mine to sell, Amanda, just as it was my choice to invite you and your family to live there." "We'll sue," Brian interjected, his face flushed. "You can't just throw us out without notice." Richard cleared his throat. "Actually, Mr. Peterson, legally, Mrs. Walker could and did. The property was solely in her name. However, she has been quite generous in the provisions she's made for your family." He proceeded to outline the financial arrangements. I had authorized a substantial sum for a down payment on a new house, continued payment of the grandchildren's private school tuition, and the education trust for Sophia and Tyler. Sophia, who had been silently glaring at me, finally spoke. "So, you're punishing me for one stupid comment about your room that's so petty." Her words stung, but I maintained my composure. "This isn't punishment, Sophia. It's me making choices about my life just as you'll do when you're older. The trust for your education will be there when you're ready for it." Tyler, quieter than his sister, asked the most perceptive question. "Were you unhappy living with us, Grandma?" The simple honesty of his question nearly broke my resolve. "Yes, Tyler, I was. Not because of you, but because I had stopped being a person in my own right. I had become just a grandmother, just an old woman whose room apparently stinks." Amanda's face flushed at the reference. "That was just teenage thoughtlessness, Mom. You completely overreacted." "It wasn't just that comment, Amanda. It was you laughing along instead of correcting her. It was 3 years of gradually being pushed aside in my own home. It was being treated like a burden instead of a person with feelings and dignity." Brian, ever practical and clearly realizing that antagonizing me further might affect their financial situation, shifted tactics. "Ethel, surely we can work something out. Maybe you could reconsider and we could start fresh with clearer boundaries." I shook my head. "I have started fresh, Brian, and I'm happier than I've been since Jackson died." Amanda's expression hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Fine, have it your way, but don't expect to remain part of our lives. You've made your choice." Her ultimate weapon, the threat of cutting me off from my grandchildren. I had anticipated this and steeled myself against the pain. "That would be your choice, Amanda, and I would respect it, just as I hope you'll eventually respect mine." As they prepared to leave, Tyler surprised everyone by giving me a quick, awkward hug. "Your new place sounds nice, Grandma," he whispered. The first month in my new home without contact from Amanda's family was both peaceful and painful. I threw myself into establishing routines and making friends in my new community, but the absence of my grandchildren left a hollow space in my heart. I worked through my complicated emotions with the help of a therapist Margaret recommended. The guilt and grief gradually gave way to a sense of quiet conviction that I had done what was necessary for my own well-being. My art class became a particular source of joy. I discovered a talent for watercolor painting that I never knew I possessed. My instructor encouraged me to enter some pieces in a local art show where, to my astonishment, one of my seascapes sold to a summer tourist. My neighbor June, a widow about my age, became a close friend. She had experienced a similar situation with her son and daughter-in-law and understood my mixed emotions without judgment. "They come around eventually," she told me over coffee on my patio one morning, "when they realize the bank of Mom isn't open for unlimited withdrawals anymore." About 6 weeks after the confrontation in Richard's office, I received an email from Tyler. My hands shook as I opened it. "Hi, Grandma," he wrote. "Mom doesn't know I'm writing to you. I miss you. My science project won first place. I wish you could have seen it." I responded warmly but carefully, not wanting to put him in the middle of adult conflicts. We established a secret correspondence that brought me immense comfort. He sent photos of his school activities and occasionally updates about Sophia, who was struggling with the transition to a smaller house and reduced social status among her peers. 3 months after I moved, I was surprised to receive a text message from Sophia herself. "Can we talk, Basan?" was all it said. Our subsequent phone conversation revealed that she had had a falling out with Amanda over college choices. Sophia wanted to study art at a less prestigious school known for its strong program. Amanda insisted on an Ivy League education. She keeps saying appearances matter more than anything, Sophia complained. That sounds so shallow, doesn't it? I bit back the irony of this realization coming from my status conscious granddaughter. What matters is what will make you happy in the long run, I told her instead. This tentative reconnection with Sophia was healing for both of us. She even apologized unprompted for her comment about my room. I was trying to look cool in front of my friends, she admitted. It was cruel and stupid. 8 months after I moved to my cottage, Amanda finally reached out. Her message was brief and not particularly warm, but it opened a door. The kids miss you. Perhaps we could meet for lunch somewhere neutral. Our first meeting was tense and awkward at a restaurant halfway between our homes. Amanda was civil but distant. The children, especially Tyler, carried the conversation. We carefully avoided any mention of the house or money. These lunches became a monthly occurrence, gradually growing less strained. There was no full reconciliation, no tearful admissions of wrongdoing on Amanda's part. But there was a slow rebuilding of a relationship based on more honest footing. I've met someone, I told them during our 6th lunch together. His name is Harold. He's a widower who lives down the street from me. Tyler was immediately curious and supportive. Sophia seemed surprised that her grandmother could have a romantic life. Amanda's expression was unreadable, but she managed a polite, "That's nice, Mom." The truth was, Harold had brought an unexpected joy to my life. We had started as walking companions, then dinner friends, and eventually something more. At our age, romance was gentle and unrushed, but no less meaningful for that. Looking back on the painful journey that led me to my new life, I realized that sometimes love means setting boundaries. By valuing myself enough to leave a toxic situation, I had actually created the possibility of more honest relationships with my family. My beachfront home became my sanctuary, the place where I rediscovered who I was beyond my roles as mother and grandmother. Watching the sunset from my porch each evening, I often thought of Jackson and felt certain he would approve of my courage. It's never too late to write a new chapter in your life. That was the most important lesson I learned from my journey. At 68, I hadn't expected to start over, but in doing so, I found a peace and fulfillment I thought had ended with Jackson's death. Sitting on my porch swing, watching the waves roll in and out, I finally felt at home in my own life. It's been exactly 1 year since I moved into my coastal cottage, and what a transformative year it's been. The anniversary feels significant, a milestone worth acknowledging in my journey of reclaiming my life and dignity. My relationship with Amanda has evolved in ways I never expected. While we'll likely never regain the closeness I once imagined, we've established a more honest connection. The pretense is gone, replaced by a straightforward acknowledgement of our differences and boundaries. We now have quarterly family dinners that rotate between my cottage, a restaurant, and occasionally their new home, a modest but lovely 4-bedroom house in a good neighborhood. These gatherings are Amanda's concession to family unity, though I suspect they're primarily for the grandchildren's benefit. Brian remains coolly polite, his words carefully measured, as if he's constantly calculating the financial implications of staying in my good graces. Tyler's weekend visits have become one of my greatest joys. Once a month, he takes the bus to spend Saturday and Sunday with me. We walk on the beach, collecting interesting shells and stones cooked together, and talk about his dreams of becoming an architect like his grandfather. During his last visit, we went through Jackson's old drafting tools that I'd saved, and Tyler's face lit up when I gave them to him. "These are better than anything they sell now, Grandma," he said, handling the precision instruments with reverence. Sophia's transformation has been more gradual but equally meaningful. The entitled teenager who once casually wounded me with thoughtless words has matured considerably. After her falling out with Amanda over college choices, she spent a summer week with me, using the time to paint seascapes and sort through her priorities. "Mom keeps talking about appearances and status," she confided during a sunset walk. "But watching you build this new life has made me think about what actually makes people happy." She ultimately stood her ground and enrolled in the art program she wanted, using part of the education trust I established. Amanda was furious at first, but eventually accepted the decision with rigid grace when it became clear Sophia wouldn't back down. Amanda herself has made small steps toward recognizing her behavior, though she's never directly acknowledged or apologized for how she treated me. The closest she came was during a tense moment when I declined to fund a luxury SUV she wanted. "I guess we took a lot for granted," she said stiffly. "We assumed Dad's money would always be available to us." "It wasn't about the money, Amanda," I replied gently. "It was about respect and being treated like a person with feelings and dignity." She had no response to that, but our interactions have been more considerate since then. My volunteer work at the local elementary school has become one of the greatest sources of fulfillment in my new life. 3 mornings a week, I help struggling readers in 2nd and 3rd grade. The children's faces lighting up when they successfully read a difficult passage reminds me of why I became a teacher in the first place. My relationship with Harold has blossomed into a sweet, supportive companionship that brings us both comfort and joy. At 72, he has a quiet wisdom and gentle humor that reminds me of Jackson in some ways while being entirely his own person. We take day trips to explore coastal towns, attend community concerts, and enjoy simple pleasures like gardening together or discussing books over coffee. Margaret visits regularly and takes immense satisfaction in seeing my transformation. "You're glowing, Ethel," she told me during her last visit. "Standing up for yourself suited you." Last Christmas, I took a bold step and invited everyone, including Amanda's family, to a holiday gathering at my cottage. I wasn't sure they would come, but to my surprise, they all did. Harold was there too, as were Margaret and a few of my new friends. The evening wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension and awkward silences, but there were also glimpses of genuine connection. Tyler proudly announced his acceptance to the architecture program at State University, and I immediately offered to fund his education directly. "Grandpa would be so proud," I told him, my voice thick with emotion. Sophia brought one of her paintings as a gift for me, a beautiful rendering of the view from my porch that now hangs in my living room. Even Amanda made an effort, bringing my favorite dessert and complimenting my home without the undercurrent of judgment I had come to expect. As I reflect on this year of healing and growth, I've realized that setting boundaries taught my family to respect me in ways that my unlimited sacrifice never did. By respecting myself first, I created the possibility for more authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The photograph of Jackson now sits on my mantle, surrounded by new memories from my coastal life. Some mornings, I swear his smile looks prouder than it did when the picture was taken. Looking toward the future, I feel hope rather than trepidation. At 69, I'm more comfortable in my own skin than I've ever been. My room doesn't stink anymore. It smells like freedom, sea air, and possibility. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your own well-being? Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is knowing when to walk away. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. And remember, it's never too late to start honoring your worth. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take good care of your beautiful heart.